David Reed pressed his thumb against the identification panel and watched the green light flicker across his face. Around him, the holding bay buzzed, with nervous energy from dozens of species he had only seen in textbooks back on Earth. A mantis-like creature clicked its mandibles. In the corner, while a being made entirely of what looked like living crystal hummed a sound that made his teeth ache. He was here to take the test that would decide if humanity deserved a seat among the stars. Officer Quillix moved to the center of the room, all 6 of its legs making precise clicks against the metal floor. Its compound eyes reflected the harsh white lights above as it began to speak through the universal translator, hanging from its thorax. "Candidates, your attention." The room fell silent. "You will be dropped on Terrath 7 for 72 hours. Your objectives are simple. Build adequate shelter. Secure 3 days of food and water. Survive." A hologram flickered to life above Quillix's head. Purple forests stretched across rolling hills under a pale orange sky. It looked almost peaceful until the image changed. "You must avoid the nightstalkers at all costs." The hologram now showed a creature that made David's stomach tighten. 6 legs supported a body built like a fusion between a panther and an alligator. Armored scales covered its hide in overlapping plates. Its head was all muscle and teeth, with 4 eyes arranged to give it perfect depth perception. The recording showed one moving through the forest with terrifying speed and grace. "Nightstalkers are the apex predators of Terrath 7, Quillix continued. "They are 4 meters in length, can climb trees, swim across rivers, and have been known to hunt for sport rather than hunger. In the 200 years we have conducted examinations on this moon, 43 candidates have encountered nightstalkers." Quillix paused, letting that number sink in. None survived longer than 8 minutes. A reptilian candidate named Hector, sitting 3 seats from David, let out a harsh laugh. 8 minutes? "My people are warriors. We fear nothing." Quillix's antennae twitched. "Your confidence is noted. The nightstalkers will be interested to test it." David said nothing. He pulled up the datapad they had each been given and started scrolling through information about Terrath 7. The plant life was mostly non-toxic to humans. The water sources were abundant. The temperature during the day reached 28 degrees, dropping to 15 at night. Manageable. The wildlife section showed various prey animals, scavengers, and then an entire chapter dedicated to nightstalker behavior. He read every word. They were territorial. They marked their hunting grounds with claw marks on trees. They were most active during dawn and dusk. They were solitary except during mating season, which had ended 2 months ago. Most importantly, every recorded attack happened when a candidate either stumbled into a fresh kill site or made aggressive movements when spotted. Interesting. "Candidates, proceed to your drop pods." The walk through the station's corridors felt longer than it was. David watched other candidates. Some moved with confidence. Others shook with fear. A gelatinous being left a trail of moisture on the floor from nerves. They entered a massive hangar where hundreds of drop pods sat in neat rows, each one a simple metal sphere with barely enough room to sit. David found his assigned pod and climbed inside. The hatch sealed with a hiss. Through the small viewport, he watched other pods begin to launch, shooting out into the black of space before angling down toward the purple and green marble that was Terrath 7. His pod shuddered. Then the rockets fired. The force pushed him back into the seat as the pod accelerated away from the station. His stomach lurched during the weightless moment between station gravity and the pod's trajectory. Then came the heat and vibration of atmospheric entry. The viewport glowed orange. The whole pod shook so hard his vision blurred. Then the parachutes deployed with a bone-jarring snap. David looked out the viewport as Terrath 7's surface came into focus. The purple forests weren't uniform like Earth's woodland. The trees had thick trunks that spiraled upward, with leaves that hung in curtains rather than growing on branches. Between the trees, he could see a stream cutting through the terrain, its water running clear over smooth stones. The pod hit the ground hard. David's teeth clicked together despite the harness holding him in place. The hatch blew open with a bang, and humid air rushed in, carrying smells that were almost but not quite like Earth. Sweet pollen, damp soil, and something else he couldn't identify. He unbuckled and climbed out. His boots sank slightly into the soft ground, covered in a moss-like growth that released tiny purple spores with each step. The emergency beacon on the pod activated automatically, its red light pulsing steadily. That beacon would help the extraction team find him in 72 hours, if he survived that long. David took a slow breath and looked around. The forest surrounded him on 3 sides, with the stream about 50 meters to his east. He could hear water running over rocks, birds, or bird-like creatures calling in the canopy, and the rustle of wind through those curtain-like leaves. No roars. No sign of nightstalkers. He pulled out the small emergency kit from the pod. A basic knife, fire starter, water purification tablets, medical supplies, and a thermal blanket. Not much, but enough. David started walking toward the stream, his mind already planning. Shelter first, near water, but not so close that he would disturb animals coming to drink. Then fire, then food. The test wanted 72 hours of survival. He figured he could manage that in 24 and spend the rest of the time actually living instead of just surviving. Behind him, in the distance, something roared. The sound of running water helped David think. He knelt beside the stream, letting the clear liquid run over his fingers while his eyes scanned the forest around him. The sun, larger and more orange than Earth's, was already climbing toward midday. He had maybe 5 hours of good daylight left to build proper shelter. He found a spot 20 meters from the stream where 3 of the spiral trees formed a natural triangle. The ground was slightly elevated, which meant water would drain away if it rained. The moss covering was thick enough to provide cushioning, but not so deep that it would hold moisture against his shelter. Perfect. David started gathering materials. The fallen logs were lighter than earth wood, with a spongy interior that made them easy to work with his knife. He cut notches and fitted them together, building a frame that leaned against the largest tree. The curtain-like leaves proved useful, layering them like shingles to create a waterproof roof. He sealed gaps with mud from the stream bank, mixing it with the purple moss to help it stick. By the time the sun reached its peak, he had a shelter large enough to lie down in, elevated off the ground by rocks he had rolled into position. It would keep him dry and protected from wind. More importantly, it was sturdy enough that nothing short of a nightstalker could knock it down. He tried not to think about that last part. Water came next. David returned to the stream with the empty container from his emergency kit. The water looked clean, but looked meant nothing when dealing with alien microorganisms. He built a simple filtration system using the container, sand from the stream bed, and charcoal from the fire he had started near his shelter. Pour water through, wait. Collect the filtered result, add a purification tablet, wait longer. Slow, but safe. While the water filtered, David turned his attention to food. The datapad had listed several species of fish-like creatures in Terrath 7 streams. He waded into the water, moving slowly to avoid disturbing the current too much. There, under a rock overhang, he spotted them. Silver bodies with 4 fins instead of 2, but they moved like fish, thought like fish. He spent an hour learning their patterns, where they rested, how they reacted to shadows. Then he built a simple trap using branches and the cord from his emergency kit, positioning it in the narrow section where the stream flowed faster. By evening, he had 3 fish and a collection of root vegetables he had identified from the datapad's database. The roots tasted like a combination of potato and turnip, bland but filling. The fish cooked well over the fire, their meat white and flaky. David ate slowly, watching the forest as darkness crept between the trees. The sounds changed after sunset. The bird calls stopped. New sounds emerged, clicking and whistling that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. His fire crackled, pushing back the darkness in a small circle around his shelter. Something crashed through the underbrush to his north. David froze, his hand moving slowly toward the knife on his belt. A creature emerged into the firelight, about the size of a large dog but with 6 legs and a face that was all eyes and teeth. It looked at him, then at the fish bones near the fire, then back at him. They watched each other for a long moment. The creature made a huffing sound and disappeared back into the forest. David released a breath he did not know he was holding. The second day started with rain. Not heavy, but steady enough that David was grateful for his well-built shelter. He stayed inside during the morning, working on improving his fish traps and weaving more leaves into a mat that would make sleeping more comfortable. The rain stopped around midday. David checked his traps and found 2 more fish waiting. He gathered more of the root vegetables and discovered a plant with purple berries that the datapad marked as edible. They tasted sour but provided good vitamins. He was smoking fish over the fire when he heard the first distress beacon in the distance. A high-pitched wailing that meant some candidate had pressed their emergency extraction button. Minutes later, he heard the sound of a shuttle arriving and departing. Someone had failed the test. David looked at his camp. His shelter was solid.
He had enough food for 5 days, not 3.
His water system worked perfectly. The test required survival. He had moved past survival into actual living. That evening, he explored farther from his camp. He found claw marks on a tree about 100 meters south. They were deep, cutting through bark and into the wood beneath. Each mark was as long as his hand. He measured the pattern and compared it to the images on his datapad. Nightstalker territory marker. Recent too, based on how fresh the exposed wood looked. David studied the marks for a long time, then carefully backed away and returned to his camp. He built up his fire larger than necessary and kept his knife close while he slept. The third day morning brought clear skies and the sound of another distress beacon. This one was closer, maybe a kilometer to the east. David heard the roar that followed the beacon. Deep and angry, the kind of sound that made his primitive brain scream at him to run. A Nightstalker had found another candidate. He did not hear an extraction shuttle for that one. David spent the third day reinforcing his camp and gathering extra food. He built a second fish trap and found a tree whose inner bark could be peeled and dried into something rope-like, useful for future projects. By evening, he had more resources than he started with. His test was essentially complete. He had 48 hours remaining, but he had already proven he could survive. Now it was just a matter of waiting. He sat by his fire that night, cooking fish and listening to the forest. Somewhere out there, other candidates were struggling. Some were probably already dead. But here, in his small circle of firelight, David was comfortable. He fell asleep thinking about home, about Montana, about the work he used to do with injured wolves and bears in Yellowstone. He woke at dawn to the sound of something large moving through his camp, and when he opened his eyes, the Nightstalker was standing 10 meters away watching him. Every instinct in David's body screamed at him to run. The Nightstalker was massive, bigger than the hollows had shown. Its shoulders stood level with his chest. Armored scales covered its body in overlapping patterns that caught the early morning light, creating shadows within shadows. 4 eyes, arranged too high and too low, tracked his every breath. David forced himself to remain still. The creature took a step closer. Its 6 legs moved with precision, placing each foot carefully on the ground. The claws on those feet were as long as David's fingers, curved and sharp. One swipe could open him from throat to stomach. But something was wrong with the Nightstalker. Its left shoulder sat lower than its right. Dark blood matted the scales there, and David could see the edge of a wound beneath the armor plating. The creature's breathing came in short, hard bursts rather than smooth cycles. Its head tilted slightly, the way an injured animal holds itself when movement causes pain. The Nightstalker circled his camp, keeping its eyes locked on him. David turned slowly, keeping his body angled away, making himself small. Prey ran, predators ran, but something uncertain simply existed in shared space. He had learned that with wolves. The creature completed its circle and stopped. It lowered its head slightly, and David heard a sound come from deep in its chest. Not quite a growl, but not friendly either. A sound of assessment. David's mind raced through everything he knew. Nightstalkers were territorial. This one had marked trees 100 meters south. He was in its territory, but it had not attacked immediately, which meant it was not treating him as prey. An injured apex predator would not waste energy on a fight unless necessary. The fish he had been smoking overnight still hung on the rack near his fire. The smell filled the air, rich and savory. The Nightstalker's nostrils flared. David made a decision that would either save his life or end it. He reached slowly toward the fish rack, moving his hand with deliberate care. The Nightstalker's eyes tracked the movement. Every muscle in its body tensed. David pulled one smoked fish from the rack. The Nightstalker's head lifted slightly. He could see its jaw muscles working beneath the scales. "Easy," David said quietly. His voice was steady despite his racing heart. "Easy now." The creature's ears, small and set close to its skull, twitched at the sound. David placed the fish on the ground between them. Then he slowly, carefully stepped backward. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. He moved until he was standing near his shelter, giving the Night Stalker clear access to the food. They watched each other. The Night Stalker took a careful step forward. Then another. It lowered its head and sniffed the fish. Its tongue, dark purple and forked, flicked out to taste the meat. Then it ate. Somewhere high above Terrath 7, alarms screamed through the monitoring station. Officer Quillix ran on all 6 legs toward the central viewing chamber, where dozens of examiners were crowded around a single screen. The human candidate's vital signs were spiking, his location beacon flashing red to indicate immediate danger. "Get an extraction team ready now," Quillix ordered. "Wait," said Alice, the amphibious medical specialist. "Look." On the screen they watched David Reed stand motionless while a Night Stalker ate fish from his camp. The creature's shoulder wound was clearly visible on the high-definition feed. "He is going to die," someone whispered. "Why is he not running?" another asked. "Because running would guarantee death," Quillix said slowly, compound eyes fixed on the screen. "He knows this." The Night Stalker finished the fish. It raised its head and looked at David again. They could all see the human's chest rising and falling with quick breaths, but his body remained still. Then David did something that made every examiner in the room freeze. He started talking to it. David kept his voice low and steady, the same tone he used with injured wildlife back home. "That's a bad wound you have there. Infection, probably. Makes you weak. Makes hunting harder." The Night Stalker tilted its head. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. "You are not here to hunt me," David continued. "You are here because you smell food and you are hurt and hungry. I understand that." He slowly knelt down, making himself smaller, less threatening. The Night Stalker watched but did not advance. David reached for his emergency kit, moving with such careful slowness that it took almost a minute to cover the distance. The Night Stalker's eyes tracked every movement. He opened the kit and pulled out the medical supplies. "Antiseptic salve, bandages, antibacterial spray. I can help you," David said. He held up the salve container, letting the Night Stalker see it. "This will make the pain less. Help you heal." The creature made that deep chest sound again. Not a growl, more like consideration. David set the salve on the ground in front of him. Then he reached for another smoked fish and placed it beside the medical supplies. "Trade," he said. "You trust me a little. I trust you a little." The Night Stalker took a step forward. Its injured shoulder dipped with the movement, and David saw it wince. Pain was universal. So was the desire to make pain stop. Another step. The creature was close enough now that David could see the individual scales, could smell the musk of its body and the copper tang of blood, close enough that one lunge would end him. The Night Stalker lowered its head and took the fish. It did not leave. "He is insane," Alice said in the monitoring station. "This is insane. This is impossible," another examiner added. "Night Stalkers do not behave this way." Quillix said nothing. Its mind was racing through David's file. Wildlife biologist, specialized in predator rehabilitation. 10 years working with dangerous animals in something called Yellowstone. Multiple commendations for handling aggressive wildlife. On screen, David picked up the antiseptic salve and opened it. He held it toward the Night Stalker, letting the creature smell the medicine. The Night Stalker sniffed. Then it made a new sound, softer, almost curious. David took one small step forward. The creature did not move away. He took another step. His hand was shaking now, but his voice remained steady. "Good, that is good. We will fix that shoulder. Make you strong again." Another step. He was close enough to touch the Night Stalker now, close enough to see the intelligence in those 4 eyes, the calculation behind the predatory instincts. David slowly raised his hand toward the wound. David's hand hovered inches from the Night Stalker's shoulder. The creature's eyes followed his movement, all 4 of them tracking with that unnerving precision. This close, he could see the wound clearly. Deep gouges cut through the armored scales, the edges swollen and leaking fluid. Another Night Stalker had done this, probably fighting over territory. The infection was spreading. Without treatment, this creature would weaken and die. David spoke quietly, keeping his tone neutral. "I need to touch you now. It will hurt at first, but then it will hurt less." The Night Stalker's breathing quickened. David moved his hand forward, placing his palm flat against the creature's scales. The Night Stalker tensed, every muscle in its body coiling tight. A low rumble built in its chest. David did not pull back. He kept his hand steady. letting the creature feel the warmth of his skin through the scales. "Easy," he whispered. "Easy." The rumble faded. Moving with careful slowness, David spread antiseptic salve around the edges of the wound. The Night Stalker flinched when the medicine touched raw flesh, but it did not strike. David worked methodically, cleaning the wound as best he could with his limited supplies. The creature's breathing slowly steadied. When he finished, David stepped back. His legs felt weak. His hands shook now that the immediate danger had passed. The Night Stalker turned its head to look at its shoulder, then back at David. They studied each other. David picked up another fish from his rack and offered it. The Night Stalker took it gently, its teeth careful not to touch his fingers. Then the creature turned and walked toward the tree line. It paused at the edge of the clearing, looked back once, and disappeared into the forest. David sat down hard beside his fire. His heart hammered against his ribs. Above him, the orange sun continued its climb through the alien sky. In the monitoring station, nobody spoke for a full minute. Examiners from a dozen species stared at the screen showing David Reed sitting beside his fire, alive and unharmed. "Review his file again," Quillex ordered. "All of it." An assistant pulled up David's records. David Reed, age 34. Wildlife biologist specialized in large predator behavior and rehabilitation. Worked in Yellowstone National Park for 8 years. Before that, Montana Wilderness Search and Rescue. He has handled injured wolves, bears, mountain lions, and various other dangerous species. He treated the Night Stalker like an injured animal, Alice said slowly. "Not as a monster. Because to him it is just an injured animal," Quillex replied. "Earth has dangerous predators. His species evolved alongside them. They learned to coexist. No other species has ever successfully approached a Night Stalker," another examiner noted. "We have warned candidates about them for 200 years. "Perhaps we have been warning them wrong," Quillex said quietly. The hours passed slowly. David spent the afternoon gathering more food and reinforcing his shelter. He could not stop thinking about the Night Stalker. The intelligence in its eyes. The way it had assessed him, made a choice, trusted him enough to accept help. His hands had stopped shaking, but the memory of standing that close to death remained fresh. Evening brought cooler air and the familiar sounds of the forest settling into night. David built up his fire and prepared food. He cooked extra fish, more than he needed, and set them aside on the rack, just in case. He was eating when he heard movement in the trees. His body tensed, but he forced himself to remain calm. The Night Stalker emerged from the forest, moving more easily now. The antiseptic had worked. The creature's gait was smoother, its injured shoulder sitting higher. The Night Stalker approached the fire and settled on its haunches. It did not come as close as before, maintaining distance, but its body language was different. Less tense, more curious. David picked up one of the extra fish and held it out. The Night Stalker moved forward and took it. This time the creature did not leave immediately. It ate the fish while sitting near the fire, its scales reflecting the orange flames. "You are feeling better," David said. "That is good." The Night Stalker's ears twitched toward his voice. David continued talking the same way he used to talk to injured animals in recovery. He told the creature about Earth, about Montana, about the work he did with wolves. The Night Stalker listened, or seemed to listen, while it cleaned its scales with that purple forked tongue. They sat together until the fire burned low. Then the Night Stalker stood, made that soft rumbling sound, and disappeared into the darkness. David laid down in his shelter, staring up at the leaf roof he had built. Tomorrow was the final day of his test. He had succeeded in every requirement: shelter, food, water, survival. But something had changed. He was not just surviving anymore. The next morning, David woke to find something lying near his fire pit. A dead animal. One of the 6-legged creatures he had seen on his first night. It was fresh, still warm, with a clean kill bite to the neck. The Night Stalker had brought him food. David sat up slowly, looking around the camp. He did not see the creature, but he could feel its presence in the forest nearby, watching. Understanding hit him like cold water. This was not just acceptance. This was reciprocity. The Night Stalker had given him a gift. In predator terms, this was the beginning of pack behavior. He prepared the meat carefully, cooking some and preserving the rest. When the Night Stalker emerged from the trees an hour later, David offered it cooked portions. The creature accepted them, then settled near the fire. They shared a meal together. In the monitoring station, Representatives from the Coalition Council had arrived. Word had spread through the station about the human who had befriended a Night Stalker. Scientists argued about pack bonding theory. Behavioral specialists reviewed footage frame by frame. Military advisors discussed implications. Quilek stood before them all. The question before us is simple. What do we do with a species that makes allies where every other species sees only death? An elder from the council, a being of crystallized energy named Keeper, spoke with a voice like wind chimes. We have tested thousands of species. All have either avoided the Night Stalkers or died trying to fight them. This human has chosen a third path. He has broken protocol, another council member argued. He was warned to avoid the creatures. He was warned they were dangerous, Keeper corrected. He did avoid the danger, by removing it through compassion. The debate continued while on Terrath 7. David Reed sat beside a fire with a Night Stalker resting nearby, completely unaware that his simple act of kindness was changing how the galaxy viewed humanity. The purple sun climbed toward noon on David's final day. He checked his timer. 20 hours remained until extraction. His test was complete by any measure. His shelter could survive a storm. His food supplies were abundant. His water system worked perfectly, and a Night Stalker was sleeping 15 meters from his fire. David watched the creature breathe, its armored sides rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The wound on its shoulder looked better, the swelling reduced. In his years working with predators, he had learned that rest was as important as medicine. The Night Stalker was healing. He had named it Ghost the previous night after the pale silver markings along its spine that caught moonlight like frost. The name felt right. Ghost's ear twitched. One eye opened, then the others. The creature lifted its head and looked at David. There was recognition there now, not just assessment. Ghost rose, stretched each of its 6 legs, and moved to the stream to drink. David cooked breakfast, splitting it between himself and Ghost. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that forms between beings who understand each other without words. The sound of crashing through underbrush broke the peace. Ghost's head snapped up. Its body shifted instantly from relaxed to ready, muscles coiled beneath armored scales. A deep growl built in its chest. David stood slowly. Something was coming through the forest, something moving fast and careless. Hector burst into the clearing. The reptilian candidate looked terrible. His scales were dull and scratched. His military uniform hung torn and dirty. He carried no supplies, no weapons. His eyes were wild with hunger and exhaustion. He saw David's camp. The fire, the food, the water. He saw Ghost. Hector froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ghost moved between David and the intruder, head low, every inch of its body radiating threat. "Do not move," David said firmly. "Stay exactly where you are." Hector's legs shook. "The Night Stalker. You have a Night Stalker in your camp." "His name is Ghost," David replied. "And yes, he is with me. That is impossible. They kill everything. They killed the candidate next to my drop zone. I heard him screaming." David kept his voice calm. "Ghost is not going to hurt you, but you need to stay still and let him understand you are not a threat." Ghost's growl grew louder. The creature took a step toward Hector. David moved smoothly, placing himself in Ghost's line of sight. He put his hand on Ghost's shoulder, right beside the healing wound. "Easy," he said quietly. "He is desperate, not dangerous, just scared and hungry." Ghost's 4 eyes flicked from Hector to David and back. The growling faded to that rumbling sound David had come to understand as consideration. "I'm going to give him food," David said, speaking to both Ghost and Hector.
Then he will leave.
"Understood?" Ghost huffed but sat back on its haunches. Hector looked like he might collapse. "Food? You have food to spare?" David gathered some of the dried fish and root vegetables, placing them in a container from his emergency kit. He approached Hector slowly, keeping his movements visible to Ghost. "Take this. There is a stream half a kilometer north. Follow the moss patterns, they point toward water. Build a fire, eat, rest. Your extraction is tomorrow, same as mine." Hector took the container with shaking hands. He stared at David, then at Ghost, then back at David. "You are feeding me, while sitting beside a Night Stalker, while I told everyone you humans were primitive." "Yeah, well," David said with a slight smile. "We are primitive. We just learned that surviving together works better than surviving alone." Hector nodded slowly. He backed away from the camp, keeping his eyes on Ghost until he disappeared into the forest. Ghost watched him go, then turned to David with what could only be described as a questioning look. He needed help, David explained. Same as you did. In the monitoring station, the final day viewing had drawn an audience from across the entire examination facility. Candidates who had already completed their tests stood alongside examiners and station crew. They watched David Reed's feed in silence. He gave away his supplies, someone said in disbelief. He has plenty, Quillix replied, more than he needs. But he trusted the Night Stalker to accept it, Alice added. He positioned himself between them. He used his body as a bridge. Keeper, the crystalline council elder, hummed thoughtfully. This is what you must understand. For most species, survival is about individual preservation. For humans, survival includes their group, even a group of one other. The Night Stalker is not his group, a military advisor protested, is it not? Keeper gestured to the screen where Ghost was settling beside David's fire again. Watch them. The human healed the predator. The predator provided food. The human protected the predator from threat. The predator accepted the human's judgment. This is pack behavior. The afternoon passed quietly. David spent time teaching Ghost simple commands using hand signals. Sit, stay, come. The creature learned with startling speed, its intelligence obvious in how quickly it connected gestures to meanings. They played in a way. David tossed pieces of wood and Ghost retrieved them, its movements graceful despite its size. They rested together in the shade. They shared food. For hours there was no test, no examination, no galaxy watching. Just a man and a predator, finding common ground on an alien moon. Evening brought the reality back. David's timer showed 6 hours until extraction. He looked at Ghost and something heavy settled in his chest. I have to leave tomorrow, he said. Ghost tilted its head at his tone. They will come for me. Take me back to the station. Ghost moved closer, pressing its armored head against David's side. The gesture was clear even across species. Comfort. Connection. David rested his hand on Ghost's scales. I wish I could take you with me, but you belong here. This is your home. Ghost made that soft rumbling sound. They sat together by the fire as the alien stars emerged above. David told Ghost about Earth, about the forests he had walked, about the animals he had helped. Ghost listened, its eyes reflecting the firelight. Neither of them wanted morning to come, but morning always comes anyway. Dawn broke with colors David had never seen on Earth. Orange and purple painted the sky while 3 small moons faded in the growing light. His timer read 0, 72 hours complete. Somewhere above, extraction ships were launching from the station. Ghost sensed the change. The creature paced the edge of camp, ears flat against its skull. It kept looking at the sky, then at David, then back at the sky. I know, David said quietly. I do not want to go either. The sound of engines reached them first. Then the extraction shuttle appeared over the tree line, its hull gleaming in the morning sun. It circled once, scanners confirming David's location, then began its descent toward the clearing 50 meters from his camp. Ghost's body went rigid. A growl built in its throat, deep and threatening. The creature positioned itself between David and the approaching shuttle. David stood quickly. Ghost, no. They are not here to hurt me. But Ghost did not understand shuttles or extraction protocols. Ghost understood that something loud and metal was coming for the human who had helped it, fed it, accepted it. Ghost understood threat. The shuttle landed with a blast of displaced air. Its boarding ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. 2 extraction team members appeared, armed with standard stun weapons. Their environmental suits bright orange against the purple forest. They saw Ghost and froze. Candidate Reed, one called through an external speaker. Move away from the Night Stalker. We will provide cover for your extraction. No, David called back. Do not use your weapons. Ghost is not a threat. Sir, protocol requires. I said no. David's voice carried authority earned from years of managing dangerous situations. I will board the shuttle, but you will not harm this creature. Ghost's growl intensified. The team members raised their weapons, fingers on triggers. David made a decision. He sat down. Right there in the dirt, halfway between Ghost and the shuttle, he sat down and crossed his legs. Sir, what are you doing? Waiting, David replied calmly. I will board when Ghost understands I am choosing to leave. Not before. In the monitoring station, alarms blared again. The extraction team's commander contacted Quillix directly. The candidate refuses to board. The Night Stalker is displaying aggressive behavior. Requesting permission to neutralize the threat. Permission denied, Quillix said immediately. Sir, the creature could. I said permission denied. Quillix's compound eyes fixed on the screen. Give them time. David turned to Ghost, ignoring the weapons pointed in his direction. Come here. Ghost hesitated, torn between guarding and obeying. Slowly, the creature moved to David's side. Good, David said. He ran his hand along Ghost's scales, feeling the armored plates under his palm. Listen to me. I have to go, but not because I want to, because I must. Ghost's 4 eyes watched his face. You are healed now, strong again. You can hunt. You can protect your territory. David's voice caught slightly. You do not need me anymore. Ghost pressed closer, and David understood. Need was not the point. Want was. He reached up and carefully removed the small medical tracker he had attached to Ghost's collar area when treating the wound. The device was designed to monitor healing, but could also be used to track the creature's location. He held it in his palm, then set it on the ground. Free, he said. You are free. Then David stood. Ghost stood with him. They faced each other for a long moment. David touched his forehead to Ghost's, feeling the cool scales against his skin. Thank you for trusting me. Ghost made that soft rumbling sound one final time. David turned and walked toward the shuttle. Each step felt heavier than the last. Ghost did not follow, but David heard the creature moving behind him, tracking his path. He reached the ramp. The team members backed away, weapons still raised toward Ghost. David turned at the entrance for one last look. Ghost sat at the edge of the clearing, watching. Their eyes met across the distance. Then David entered the shuttle, and the ramp closed behind him. Through the viewport, he watched Ghost remain sitting as the shuttle lifted off. The creature grew smaller as they climbed, a silver-marked shape against purple forest, until the shuttle banked and Terrath 7 fell away below. David did not cry, but his eyes were wet. The monitoring station erupted in discussion the moment David's shuttle docked. Quillix met him at the airlock, all 6 legs moving in what might have been agitation or excitement. David Reed, your examination results are being reviewed by the Coalition Council. David nodded, too tired to care much. Did I pass? You did more than pass. Quillix gestured toward a conference room. Come. They wish to speak with you. The conference room held more beings than David had ever seen in one place. Species from across the galaxy. Council members in formal dress, scientists with recording equipment, military officers with expressions ranging from impressed to concerned. Keeper, the crystalline elder, spoke first. David Reed of Earth. In 200 years of examinations on Terrath 7, you are the first candidate to survive direct contact with a Night Stalker. You are also the first to form a bond with one. I just helped an injured animal, David said. You saw an injured animal where 43 others saw only death, Keeper replied. This is not a small difference. Quillix stepped forward. Your species has demonstrated something the galaxy has not seen. You turned an enemy into an ally through compassion. You completed your test requirements in less than 48 hours, and spent the remaining time building relationships instead of just surviving. Another council member, a being of flowing liquid, added, Humanity's application for coalition membership is hereby approved with full privileges. Furthermore, we offer you personally a position in the diplomatic corps. David blinked. Me? I am just a wildlife biologist. You are someone who builds bridges, Keeper said. The galaxy has warriors. It has scientists. It has politicians. But it has very few who can stand between two dangerous things and make them see each other as allies instead of threats. 6 months later, David stood in the purple forest again. The coalition had established a Night Stalker research and conservation program, and David led the team. They studied the creatures, protected their habitat, taught other species that coexistence was possible. Ghost found him on the 2nd day. The creature emerged from the trees as if no time had passed. The shoulder wound had healed completely, leaving only faint scars under the scales. Ghost approached without hesitation, pressing its head against David's chest. Hey friend, David whispered. I came back. They sat together under the alien sky while David's research team watched from a safe distance. He activated his recorder for the official log, but his words were personal. We do not survive because we are the strongest. We survive because we understand that sometimes the scariest thing in the forest is just another living being who is afraid and alone, just like us. And maybe, if we are brave enough to see them, really see them, we find we are not so different after all. Ghost rumbled softly. David smiled. Yeah, not so different at all.